to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's August 16th here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning.
Good morning, and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. The once popular honeymoon and summer vacation destination, Maui Island in Hawaii, is turning back tourists. That's because wildfires there killed more than 99 people and destroyed hundreds of homes. Authorities are still looking for more dead bodies and the exact cause of the fire. What we know so far is that this is already the deadliest wildfire the U.S. has seen in more than a century. Malaria is quickly spreading in Korea. The KDCA on Tuesday found a total of 509 cases have been reported this year. That's nearly 4 times more than what we saw last year. Officials are afraid that we may see the total malaria count surpass 700. And the last time this happened was in 2011. Health authorities believe we're seeing more malaria cases than previous years because COVID-19 restrictions have been lifted. This has allowed more people to move about and be susceptible to this mosquito-borne disease. Malaria symptoms start with shivers and then cause high fever, extreme fatigue, and vomiting. Moving on, yesterday was National Liberation Day of Korea, commemorating the 78th year since Korea gained its independence from colonial Japan. Celebrations have been held nationwide and even in New York. The city's mayor, Eric Adams, raised the Korean national flag at Bowling Green Park, which is famous for the Wall Street Bull statue. And the city's mayor said New York is like Seoul of the United States. He said he wanted to raise the Korean flag to show how much he respected the courage of independence fighters and their descendants who moved to the States and have since contributed to the country. Now, I'd like to expand this news story here in the studio. Walter, I was reminded once again after reading this that it's such a great time to be living as a Korean in this world at the moment. And what do you think after hearing this story?
Yeah, well, obviously it was a very good gesture by the New York mayor. But yes, it's days like the Korean Liberation Day that really make me appreciate our ancestors. I mean, though I'm a proud Australian citizen, I'm an even prouder Korean-born male. And, you know, it was a very extremely dark time and a horrible era that our, ancestors had to go through. And if it wasn't for them, none of us would probably be here today, or it'd be a very different situation for sure. Now, not to underestimate our generation or our younger generation, but I just don't see the same sort of bravery that our ancestors had and the passion that they had for their country. I mean, let's take Yu Guan-sun for example. She was 17 years old when she gathered people to rally up against the Japanese government.
Colonial rule at the time.
Yeah, the colonial rule. And I mean, when I was 17, I was complaining about, getting out of bed in the morning. So
Same year.
Yeah, so I just can't imagine what they had to go through and just the passion that they had to save their country.
For sure, the socioeconomic atmosphere at the time did push a lot of youngsters to be much more mature than what we're seeing right now, which is inevitable. It was the different socioeconomic atmosphere. Right. But moving on, every National Liberation Day marks a time where we look back at how far Korea-Japan relations have come. And this year's National Liberation Day came just a few days ahead of a pre-planned trilateral summit between South Korea, Japan, and the United States. And on this day, President Yoon vowed to strengthen security ties with Japan. He specifically called Tokyo a partner. At the same time, though, officials here in the country have expressed their regrets after Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida sent offerings to the Yasukuni Shrine. And this is a contentious site as it's thought as a symbolic relic of Imperial Japan's wrongdoings. It enshrines the main culprits of Japan's wartime aggressions, including 14 Class A war criminals. And depending on what we saw yesterday, Chi-hee, where do you think Korea-Japan relations are heading now? And also, is there anything you'd like to see in terms of major breakthrough happen for the pre-planned trilateral summit scheduled for Friday?
Well, like you mentioned, President Yoon Suk-yeol referred to Japan as a partner in his commemorative speech speech on the Liberation Day, but shortly after, it was quite upsetting to see the politicians of Japan visit the shrine, including
Send offerings.
Exactly, including the Prime Minister. And it's really upsetting because it seems as though the two states are not on the same page regarding the matter, historic matters. And I feel like this was a very symbolic scene where Korea really has to send a clear message towards Japan for a more constructive and future-oriented relationship between the two. It's ever so complex, you know. And it's always the historical matters that's a setback between the two. And regarding the upcoming trilateral meeting, I hope to see a more concrete and a more upgraded kind of cooperation in the fields of diplomacy, defense, security, as well as the economy. Between the three countries.
Yeah, we must remember history, but from now on forth, this is a history that we'll be making now. So cooperation is key to make better cooperative alliances. And that was our news feed for this Wednesday. Let's now head into our discussion topic. Protecting your child is only natural, but overprotecting them to the extent that you're hurting others is definitely a problem. Nevertheless, it seems to be getting more common in South Korea. Take a look at the screen to find out more. Almost every Saturday in July, South Korean teachers were out on the streets demanding better protection of their rights, especially against overprotective parents and their misbehaving children. Rallies were triggered by a 23-year-old elementary school teacher taking her own life in a classroom. Teachers nationwide speculated that she had been under immense stress, which they could relate to because many had experience having to deal with parents' complaints. Data shows over the past 5 years, 1,252 teachers had been investigated through lawsuits or formal complaints filed by parents over alleged child abuse. But what parents considered abuse included things like a teacher holding the hands of a student that tried to physically attack her. As we saw in the VCR just now, over the past few weeks, we've seen conflicts between teachers and parents hit the roof. Not all parents, but specifically those that seem to be overprotective of their children to the extent that they're okay when crossing the line when it comes to others. At the end of the day, teachers are someone else's child as well. And Sihi, why don't you walk us through this issue?
Sure. So we've recently talked a lot about the passing of an elementary school teacher, and this has brought up a conversation regarding teachers' rights in the country. Apparently, the teacher suffered from malicious complaints from these parents, and this raised concerns about the behavior of some parents who are referred to as the obnoxious parents who abuse their power, overprotect their children, and mistreat teachers. And there was also this case of a well-known Korean webtoon artist, Ju Ho-min. He is raising a developmentally disabled child, and he sued a special education teacher for child abuse. And this has also sparked a lot of controversy because people thought this was another example of abuse of power by a parent, and it's really an excessive protection of the child. And what's notable is that back in the day, there was much abuse of power by the teachers, and so there were laws put in place to protect the rights of students, but it seems that this balance between the rights of teachers and students has really been disrupted these days. And so recently, the Ministry of Education is proposing measures to protect teachers' rights once again, by proposing measures such as requiring the scheduling of parent-teacher counseling or meetings in advance, and also installing CCTVs in one of these counseling spaces as well.
I think that's a positive direction that we're heading towards because, as you mentioned, in the past, we focused more on protecting the rights of each individual student because at the time we had corporal punishment. A lot of teachers were given a lot of power to discipline the children, but sometimes to the extent that it was inhumane. But in the process, we sort of overlooked the fact that teachers also need protection. And that's why we're heading there. But would you like to add on to what type of issues we've been seeing?
Right. Well, like, there have been so many cases of overprotective parents that it's even spawned like words for them, like a tiger mum or the helicopter parents. But like, there have been reports of, you know, parents even doing silly, what I think are silly things, are like, you know, making the teacher report when they go to the bathroom or something like that. If it was for medical reasons, I understand, but if it was just to track your child or something, I think it's a little bit excessive, to be honest with you. Though we can't always blame the parents, like the way certain parents raise their children as well can lead to the child feeling higher than the teacher in some way, like they're better than the teacher. And then we've seen situations like this, like where students have attacked teachers. I mean, in my day, it was absolutely, regardless of how bad we were, we would never attack a teacher, or we'd never lay our hands on teachers. But that's happening these days, and it seems to be happening more frequently. But like, I also do see the side that he mentioned of teachers abusing their power. I mean, I had a rough time at school, and my parents, I don't think they were being overprotective, but they were trying to look out for me. But unfortunately, the teachers that I dealt with were abusing their power, but this is also a very, very, very long time ago. So a lot of things have changed, and they should be changing.
Yeah, but I think the focus to today's discussion topic is we've talked about how a lot of teachers have lost their authority in the classroom. So what angle we wanted to focus on is, could that be from overprotective parents? Because that is an issue that people are saying. And not to overgeneralize all the parents out there. There's so many good relations some parents have with teachers, but there are certain cases where these helicopter parents are overprotective of their children. And you two in the studio have experience teaching students. So I'm wondering, do you guys have any experience dealing with overprotective or sometimes even disrespectful parents?
Well, back in the day when I was studying for this graduate school entrance exam to enter the interpretation graduate school, I came across a very overprotective parent. I mean, I wasn't the teacher, I was also a student, but I had a fellow student who was about the same age as me, 27 or 28, around that age. She was just studying in this cram school, but her mother would call in to tell the teacher not to give her too complicated or too difficult prompts or questions to her. And she even went to the point of complaining to the teacher why her daughter was continuously failing the entrance exam.
But didn't she ask for easier prompts?
She did.
Oh.
Exactly. So it's really surprising because if you're 27, you're an adult and you're supposed to be in charge of what you are studying. You have to be able to make decisions for yourself. And I've seen this.
And what did you think about that?
I thought it was excessive, of course.
You thought that wasn't the right way to go?
No, it wasn't.
What about you? You've taught a lot of students before.
Yeah, so I've taught from kindergarten up until, 80 years old, but,
Wait, 80 years old?
Yeah, even probably older, to be honest with you. I'll give you two quick examples. One was when I was working in a kindergarten, and the student complained to her mum that she wasn't getting enough stars on her name. Now, the reason why she wasn't getting enough stars on her name was because she wasn't doing a good job and others were. So the mother called up and said, I want my daughter to get the same amount of stars as the top student. And, well, let me just give you a little insight. Your daughter was not that good of a student. That's why she didn't get the stars. Okay? So just let you know.
That's hard love. That's hard love as a teacher. Yeah.
But on a more serious note, I did actually teach a 20-something, early 20-year-old beauty pageant contestant. And her mother was very overprotective. She would basically create her schedule for her, and she had to follow it. And when I say that, I mean not like a manager, more of just controlling, like what time to get up, what to eat, how much to eat, when to have a shower, when to go to the bathroom.
She was like an avatar.
Exactly. Basically, her mother was clearly vicariously living through her because she wanted her to win this pageant. I do understand that, you do need to encourage your children to work hard, but that was, in my opinion, child abuse.
Yeah, it's understanding that parents want to strive for the best. You're a parent yourself, Walter,
yes.
So you might understand the psychology behind trying to protect your child. Very briefly, can you mention, though, why do you think parents could have that sense of wanting to overprotect their children?
Well, you do understand as a parent that you want the best for your children. Like, I obviously want the best for my daughter. I want her to do really well. I'm going to try not to be an overprotective parent, though she is a daughter, and traditionally men do have a harder time with women as with younger girls. But saying that, like, I do understand the line between going too far and not taking things overly overprotective in a way.
I think it's a different definition of love, don't you think?
I think to be honest with you, when you're overprotective, I think it can be sort of delusional in a way. You love your children, obviously. You should love your children.
Right.
But there is a point where it's too far.
And we heard from Walter's experience, but is there any socioeconomic factors that are pushing more millennial parents to be this way?
Oh, definitely. I think it's a mix of the decreasing birth rate, as well as the extreme individualism among the parents, young parents these days, because parents these days, they're mostly millennials, born in the 1980s, and they grew up in an environment where meritocratic environment was centering around like performance, and they would always have to do well at school, and corporal punishment was a norm as well. So it seems as though they don't want their children, who they tend to raise like kings and queens, experience this sort of environment, educational environment, because they've experienced it as they were growing up. So they want to be protective of their children.
And that's what's happening in Korea at the moment. But to find out what's happening around the world and seeing if our global viewers can actually relate to the topic of the day, we prepared 3 of their comments. If you take a look at the screen, you can see what 3 of them had to say. So our first comment is Ann Kate, who said helicopter parents or overparenting in India is mostly because these terms came from the West. Otherwise, we call them strict or disciplined. So we can see a different perception there. Cool music to my ear said in the UK, if a parent is overprotective, we might call it controlling. Another name is smothering. And Doina our hire said selfish. We must love our kids, but we must not destroy their personality. I have 2 kids and we're friends. That's amazing. Thank you to our viewers who shared their experience from around the world. And let's now hear from a psychology expert to find out what the psychology is behind these overprotective parents. To find out more about the psychology behind these overly protective parents, we're going to include a psychology expert. It's Professor Hwang Sun-mi from Torch Trinity Graduate University. Welcome, Professor Hwang.
Good morning.
All right, so I would like to ask you, based on your profession, what can we define as being overprotective? What's the psychology behind parents being overly sensitive or protective over their child?
Overprotection refers to the tendency to estimate risks too much and control external factors to keep safe. There may not be a single reason, but anxiety and fear may be psychological factors in this parenting style. I think parental fear can be largely divided into 2 types. The first one is the fear of being alone. In this case, parents themselves need someone to rely on emotionally. Therefore, they are more likely to make a codependent relationship with their own child, even after appropriate age. The second fear is the fear of failing to be a good parent. These parents tend to be afraid of hurting their child emotion while they are disciplined, and often experience guilty feelings of being a bad parent. Some parents try to prove their self-worth through child achievement because being a good parent can be a main purpose and life goal for them.
Well, Professor, how does this then affect the child, and what type of personality traits or behaviors do these children show?
I believe the main purpose of parenting is to help children become mature adults and become independent. Maturity and independence are the key words here. As we all know, mature personality grows through experience of learning through mistakes and failures. But overprotective parents take away children's chance to grow up, the chance to regulate child's own desire, satisfaction, impulsive behaviors, sometimes their aggressive reaction toward others. Kids should learn how to adjust themselves in different situations. Otherwise, it's easy for them to increase narcissistic personality trait. Children guided by their parents all the time lack social skills, and it also lowers the level of self-worth when they realize that they are not really ready to go out to the world. It undermines child's ability to make their own decision and take responsibility for the result.
So how can we better deal with overprotective parents that cross the line, or could you give them words of advice on what to do?
Okay, that's a really good question. And if we realize overprotective parents are anxious and fearful adult child who obsessively wants to control everything, we consider them as people who need to be trained. It is important to set clear boundaries. Boundaries are really important. It is important to set clear boundaries and stick to the principles in how to deal with people who are anxious and afraid. Of course, the first thing will be to create the educational system where rules and principles are prioritized. In this way, parents can learn from their own frustration and unsatisfied desires, just as their children should learn from it. How maybe overprotective parents confuse discipline with child abuse. However, optimal level of frustration is a real gift for the child to discover their potentials. We just need to trust that our children can find their own way to deal with it.
Yeah, thanks to you, Professor. I think we understood both sides of the story now. It's all coming from anxiety, but at the end of the day, everyone wants the best for their children because they are the future generation. They are going to be leading society. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be hearing from you today.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
All right, and we're going to end off on a brighter note. Do you guys think that there's any positive angles to seeing parents being more protective over their child? If not, in what way do you think we should go from now?
Well, it's quite interesting. As a parent, hearing what the professor had to say really kind of opened my eyes to ways that we can fix the problem of being overprotective. For example, she mentioned that the parent's fear of not being a good parent. I never felt that that was a problem. And I'm one of those people who actually constantly fears that I'm not going to be a good enough parent. So I didn't realize that could lead to being overprotective. So I think if we need to teach parents, not to be overprotective, if that means taking classes, if that means having something to educate the parents in, because there's things I just realized in that interview that, wow,
Yeah.
like...
It opened your eyes a bit.
Yeah, I need to learn a lot more than I thought. Yeah.
And that's what's happening around the world, right? You've been experiencing your classrooms in Thailand. Could you also tell us about that and how they have regulations or policies to better protect teachers and anyone else? Yeah.
That's right. So growing up in Thailand, I went to an international school. There are a lot of families from various diverse cultural backgrounds. And they had this culture where they respect teachers. There was mutual respect towards teachers and parents between them. And parents associations would support both the students and teachers as well. In Thailand, they have Y Crew. It's Teachers' Day, but it literally means to bow and show respect to the teachers. I mean, we have Teachers' Day here in Korea too, but they have this school system where they make students and parents show respect towards the teachers. So I think this should be a culture that we, Korea, should start building once again.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I hope today's episode could shed light to protection is not bad, right? It's just the fact that overprotection coming from anxiety, though it's understandable, if it goes too far where you're hurting another child, and that could be adults, because at the end of the day, we are still children at heart. We are someone else's child. But understanding that it comes from anxiety and that we have regulations to stop this is critical. And that's all we have for you today. We'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Choi Ji-hee.
My pleasure.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.